Hello everyone and welcome to Pisa Presents. Today we'll be taking a journey into Indonesia by way of mortar and find out what happens when a new species of hominid is discovered and it brings out the ugly side in paleontology with, what doesn't Homer tell us here? They found the Hobbits. Now, years ago when the discovery of these fossils was announced, I was an anthropology and geology major, and one of our anthro professors, Dr. Webb, came in screaming that title, full tilt Kermit flail, dragging along our department's study skeleton Homer. So, one of my favorite memories, actually. Now, the proper name of the species is Homo floresiensis. But there are some that still actually argue they are not even that, not even their own species. So let's take a look into what the hobbits, so to speak, are, how they are found, and how they are still so controversial. Now, this is the island of Flores in Indonesia. It was named as such by the Portuguese in honor of the regional flowers, which are well known to be quite beautiful there. Its indigenous name is something rather different, Nusanima, which has the rather more boss meaning of either dragon or snake island. Now, as long ago as the 1950s, locals were finding tools much like these, and expeditions began in 1965. They weren't too sure as to what they would find, but the tools made some suspect that the island would provide evidence of human migration in the region. And finally, on September 2nd of 2003, a joint team of Australian and Indonesian paleontologists, led by one Mike Morwood, were excavating in Liang Bua, right here. Now, this cave's name translates to cool cave. They found a partial skeleton with a skull, a rare feat in and of itself to find a skull like that. Now, this specimen, determined to be a female based on her hips, was named LB1. Now, also too, Flo for short. Now, in life, Flo is about 3 foot 7 inches tall and perhaps 55 pounds with very large feet for her legs. In death, she proved to be quite problematic, with her remains having features similar to both early and later hominids, and her size complicating things so much that her discoverers kept quiet about it for roughly a year. They really had no idea what to do with this here because they were so confused in a way with this combination of features, and they weren't sure how the scientific community would accept their discovery. Since then, the remains of about 15 or so individuals have been found, with the media immediately nicknaming them, of course, the Hobbits. Now, back in the day, the excavation team noticed that while the specimen had a rather small skeleton, it had its wisdom teeth erupted. So they knew darn well that they had an adult specimen of a smaller in stature new species of human. She also had a very reduced chin, and her shoulders were rotated forward, giving her a slouching position. Now, one would think that finding what would readily be a new species of human would be enough to make anyone really immediately shout that news from the treetops. Thing is, and I say this politely, very few things bring out the weirdos in the sciences more than paleoanthropology, and this was what the crew knew and why they kept quiet for so long about it. Now, the team's discovery was, and still is, granted with some measures of what I'll just call derision and even hostility, with some arguing that Flo had no spot in the hominid family tree. Sorry, I really don't like saying this. But the argument made was that she was so unusual that she had to be a differentially able person. I'm sorry. Okay, here's the problem, folks. I'm neurodivergent myself. I actually have epilepsy, and some of the things written about this specimen are very ableist when you read it. I mean, one paper I read online said that these specimens were an isolated population of persons with Down syndrome, evidenced by how, and this is a quote by the author, this was not mine, primitive their skulls were. Now, to use that word in connection with anybody with Down syndrome is a really revolting thing to do. Really, really revolting thing to do. Now, sadly, that's kind of something that you see a lot with people that sort of counter and talk about this specimen a lot. People will use Down syndrome, microcephaly. They will use various conditions, and I'm not saying that they're all using it in a nasty or negative connotation, but again and again and again, people keep using these connotations as a way to describe these specimens in pretty much linking them together in a negative and ableist manner. Fortunately, that isn't the prevailing view, and really it's rather illogical when you think about it. I mean, how could a group of that many people with the same medical condition find themselves in the same isolated spot? And really, the size of the skeletal differences of the hobbits were enough to make them their own species, so hurrah! Now, in naming the species, attempts were first made to name it Homo hobbitus. But the Tolkien estate had some words to say about that. So yeah, they weren't very happy. And that is how Homo floresiensis got to stay. Now, irregardless of any drama over their name or place in evolution, what do we know about our friends the hobbits? So let's go to their local museum at Flores to find out some similarities and differences that they have with other hominids. Now, first of all, and I find this utterly hysterical that they got such flack for not being able to name the species hobbit, but in Indonesia there is a literal hobbit village. So, just kind of like a hearty, good natured cottagecore thumbs up at the establishment, which is absolutely really hysterical that they got away with that. And I salute whoever even thought of doing that because that is really priceless. So, we know that the hobbits, which I'll continue to call them, used stone tools, and some argue that they were capable of fire, although the evidence of that is kind of contested based on cut marks on this fellow right here. This is Stegodon, an elephant that lived on the island that was, yes, a bit heckin' bigger than them. Now, while some argue over how advanced their stone technology was, there still remains the fact that a species roughly 3.5 feet tall was able to take down these things. Now, there were some other animals on the island. There were very large forms of rats, rabbits, vultures, storks, other things. Whether or not they actually hunted these animals, or some people argue that they were incapable of hunting because of their size and they just scavenged. But still, the fact remains is that in their artifact assemblages, they were able to find in these bones various stone tools and things that they have then linked to the hobbit fossils. So it implies indirectly that they were pretty darn good hunters, at least one would reason. So when did the hobbits cross through Isengard? I honestly have no idea what that actually means. My husband tried to get me to watch Rings of Power and I kept falling asleep. I just really didn't like it. Now, how they got to Flores, this here is the island's volcano. Nobody really knows for sure, granted the island's distance from nearby ones and the lack of a land bridge. Their ancestors, whomever they were, arrived between 1.27 to 1 million years ago, ballpark. DNA testing has been attempted several times, but it's difficult getting good results due to how damaged the specimens are. Now, in terms of why and how, well, keep in mind that these fossils, a lot of them are found in a cave in a very hot, damp area. After they're found, there's actually a drying process before they can even be taken to the nearby museum for any testing. Originally, the fossils were dated between 35 to 14,000 years ago, but better testing has shown them to be from 100 to about 60,000 years ago, with a lot of the stone tools dated to roughly 50,000 years ago, which is when people think that Homo floresiensis went extinct, about 50,000 years ago, which is a time of the arrival of not only modern humans to Indonesia, as well as great climatic change in the area. So it's theorized that somehow those two changes together were so severe that it was what led to the eventual demise of the hobbits themselves. Now, their brain size was comparative to chimps, which that smaller size does not necessarily denote a low intelligence, merely that it was a smaller size. Australopithecus, after all, was also a smaller hominid, and look at all they accomplished. So, from whom did the hobbits evolve? There are three main ideas. The first is we have no honking clue. Origins unknown from a yet undiscovered species. The second idea is Homo habilis, based off of the feet and the fact that they had wrists like early African hominids. Some people will also maybe throw Australopithecines in here. But the thing is that they're not known to have ever been in this area and have features not very akin to floresiensis. So, even granted evolution in the time and passage of all those processes, that's most likely a no. Now, the third and most accepted idea is that they're from a group of Homo erectus, which is to date the only species of early human found in the area and one which was actually already found in nearby Java. So, really, what happened? Well, in short, no pun intended, Foster's rule. It results in a phenomenon called insular dwarfism, where larger animals, when placed in isolation in a smaller environment, get smaller over time due to environmental and evolutionary pressures. So the general idea is that somehow, roughly 1 million years ago, a group of happy-go-lucky Homo erectus arrived on the shores of Flores, and over the millennia grew smaller and smaller into the hobbits that we now know and love. Modern-day Flores residents even have a semi-official cryptid that they call the Ape Man, which, you guessed it, is a 3.5-foot tall hairy ape man with big feet. No comment on the reality of that, other than that, yes, the hobbits are indeed extinct. You cannot keep a species around for 50,000 years without people finding it. They are definitely extinct. Sorry, folks, that's not true. Now, altogether, though, how they got there and some of the other mysteries will probably remain unknown. But if there is one thing we know about the hobbits themselves, Homo floresiensis, is that they keep things surprising and will hopefully give us more discoveries in the future. So, thank you very much, folks, for joining us. Enjoy your weekend and have a lovely rest of your day now. Bye.